Since the Republicans control the House of Representatives, could Speaker Mike Johnson and the Republicans object to the seating of some or maybe all of the duly elected representatives belonging to the Democratic Party? This has happened in the past. Immediately after the end of the Civil War, Congress refused to seat the congressmen elected from the former states of the Confederacy. And we ask this important question: is this valid legal precedent today? Please, we welcome interesting questions in the comments. Let us learn and reflect together. At the end of our talk, we'll discuss the sources used for this video. Please feel free to follow along in the PowerPoint script we uploaded to SlideShare, which includes illustrations. Our sister blog includes footnotes, and both include our Amazon book links. First, some historical background. In early 1864, in the middle of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was worried that he would lose the election that November. Civil War casualties were atrocious, and although General Grant was winning solid victories in the Western Theater, capturing Vicksburg in the summer of 1863, Robert E. Lee was winning Southern victories in the more visible Eastern Theater of War around Virginia and surrounding states. But in early 1864, Lincoln appointed Grant to lead all federal forces. And although the Union Army still suffered atrocious casualties, Grant relentlessly attacked and flanked Lee's Confederate armies, wearing down the Confederacy. Northern morale and Lincoln's support surged when General Sherman's army burned Atlanta, commencing their march to the sea, destroying Confederate resources, and ensuring that Lincoln would be handily reelected. To ensure his reelection, Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans selected Andrew Johnson from Tennessee, a war Democrat, to be vice president. They expected that if Lincoln won, it would be by narrow margins, so they were more concerned about Lincoln's reelections than Johnson's qualifications. Unfortunately, after Lincoln was assassinated shortly after his inauguration, President Johnson revealed himself to be a Southern sympathizer hostile to the civil rights of the newly freed slaves. In the last year of the Civil War, Lincoln had adopted a lenient plan of presidential Reconstruction. President Johnson, under this inherited plan, elections had been held in several Confederate states. The historian Eric Foner notes that many of these senators and representatives were former Confederate political and military leaders. Their election, together with the unwillingness of the Johnson government to acknowledge the basic rights of the former slaves, Republicans took as evidence that the white South did not fully accept the results of Union victory. And even after the defeat in the Civil War, those running for office in the former Confederate South insisted on the right to govern their former slaves in their own way, however they wished, enacting harsh black codes that effectively re-enslaved blacks freed in the South, denying their right to vote. Although Mississippi amended its pre-war constitution to abolish slavery, she initially rejected the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. And this hubris greatly affected Northern votes and politicians. The Deep South, the former Confederate States, was a brutal place for the freed blacks. Lynching was a crime that was rarely prosecuted during the Reconstruction, Redemption, and Jim Crow eras. And indeed, often members of law enforcement wore the hoods of the KKK. And if prosecuted, rarely would a Southern jury convict a white person of murder for lynching blacks. The history of the Senate recalls that when the 39th Congress convened on December 4, 1865, some of the newly elected legislators from former Confederate states presented credentials, expected to be seated in the Senate. Questions about the validity of the credentials prompted the House and Senate to establish a joint committee on Reconstruction. This 15-member committee, composed of 9 representatives and 6 senators, investigated the conditions of the states which form the so-called Confederate States of America to determine whether they are entitled to be represented in either house of Congress. And following its investigation, the committee refused to admit the Southern members. Congress assumed control of radical Reconstruction. Federal troops occupied the Southern states, protecting the civil rights of blacks from the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist terrorists, also protecting black suffrage. The Southern states would not be represented in Congress until they were readmitted into the Union, a process that took several years. With the support of federal troops, Lincoln's Republican Party won elections to state and federal offices in the South, until federal troops were withdrawn after the disputed federal election of 1876. Now, had the law surrounding this issue not continued to evolve, this indeed would be a troubling precedent. But the law did evolve, In their 1969 Powell v. McCormick decision, the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren decided that Congress could deny any duly elected representative their seat in Congress only if they did not meet the narrow list of qualifications for membership in the House of Representatives, listed in the Constitution. These qualifications are that the member must be at least 25 years old, have been a citizen for 7 years, and live in the district they represent. The House of Representatives had attempted to refuse to seat Adam Clayton Powell, a controversial black congressman who was embroiled in credible financial scandals. There was only one dissent on technical grounds, and Thurgood Marshall was an associate justice for this 1969 decision. If the Republicans try to contest the seating of newly elected Democratic members of the House of Representatives, they will be challenged in court immediately. It is doubtful that the courts will refuse to seat elected Democratic congressmen. But those in Congress and the media need to prepare for this possible battle and research the court cases and judicial precedent in the recent Supreme Court rulings. This is not wrongly decided precedent, and this precedent must not be overturned. You might ask, was the Santos case also a bad precedent? And how was Santos expelled from Congress? George Santos was expelled under a different provision of the Constitution, which enables the House of Representatives to expel any member by a 2/3 vote. Only 6 members of the House have been expelled, including 3 members who were expelled for supporting the Confederacy in 1861, the beginning of the Civil War. Another 2 were convicted in court, and Santos's conviction is assured with the number of indictments he is facing. And this question came to my mind after several Trump lawyers were indicted and disbarred from participating in the fake elector scheme in 2020, and several have pleaded guilty in the Georgia RICO case. What is overlooked is that there was precedent for their efforts to contest the counting of the electoral votes on January 6, 2020. And the precedent was that the segregationists, Southern Democrats, submitted alternate slates of electors in the contested election of 1876. Now, likely those who forwarded these fake slates of segregationist Democratic Party electors to Congress in 1876 were breaking the law, although none were prosecuted, as many in the South were threatening to restart the Civil War. Now, a point that confuses many is that under Lincoln, the Republican Party championed civil rights for the freed slaves, while the Democratic Party in the Deep South enacted state Jim Crow segregationist laws. After Nixon, LBJ, Reagan, and the passage of the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s, most white voters in the Deep South switched their allegiance from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. Now we'll discuss the sources we used for this video. Eric Foner's Second Founding and W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction provide a window into the Civil War and Reconstruction eras, and both challenge the lost cause myth of the noble Confederate cause and happy black slaves, instead arguing that the Reconstruction era sought to reestablish democracy in both the Deep South and in America. However, much of our detailed story is from both the U.S. Senate's website and Dr. Wikipedia, and these 2 books have inspired multiple reflections. The YouTube description includes a link to our PowerPoint script that we uploaded to SlideShare and also our blog. Please support this channel by sharing this video with your friends and by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons and by clicking on the Amazon links to purchase any of the books we discussed, which will earn us a very small affiliate commission. And please consider becoming a patron of our channel. Plus, we will host special discussion groups for our patrons. Plus, you can click on the Meetup or small M icon to participate in our online discussions, where we practice our future YouTube scripts. And please click on the links for other videos that will broaden your knowledge and improve your soul.